Today on Nobody's Side, I interview Sam Slade. Sam is a candidate for Texas House District 49. As ever, I ask him about the divisions in our nation and what we might do to overcome them. Can you just introduce yourself, your name, where you're running, and the office you're seeking?
Sure. My name is Sam Slade. I'm running for state representative in House District 49 in my hometown of Austin, Texas.
All right. And you are running as a Democrat, correct?
I am. Yes, sir.
Okay. And as I understand it, it's a pretty crowded primary field at the moment.
It's 8 people in the Democratic primary alone, and then we have a Green Party candidate on the ballot too.
Wow, that is a lot. So for the first section of this discussion, I'm interested in your experience in running for office. I would imagine that for most folks who are going to be listening, this is not a thing most people do. I imagine many people might aspire to it. Many people might think to themselves, someday I'm going to run for office. I'm going to do this thing. But you did it. But you decided you were going to take a step and do this thing. So I'm wondering, can you tell me a little bit about the moment? When did running for office first cross your mind? Why did it cross your mind? Was it a sudden jolt or was it a buildup? Tell me about why you made this leap.
Sure. I mean, I've been working on campaigns since the summer after I got out of high school at Austin High. And my first campaign job was knocking doors for John Kerry in Karl Rove's neighborhood and talking about paying your dues. And I mean, I got more doors slammed on me. I mean, it got me ready for, a world of acting and comedy and just campaigning, and especially campaigning for myself. I looked around and, my partner, my wife, Tara, and I, we did not plan to get in this race by any means. And obviously, if you've worked on campaigns for 20 years, worked on 40 campaigns before I was 40 years old, it's always in the back of your mind, maybe someday, I think I'd been around enough great candidates, enough great campaigns that I saw that, like, man, timing is so important. Timing is so important. And I guess I threw that old rule out the window because we just went sprinting into this. After I saw what was going on with ICE, being married to a woman of color. And, when I got to a place last summer where if I didn't hear back from her within 30 minutes of leaving the office, even if she's stopping at the grocery store and left her phone in the car, I start getting a little edgy. And then I got a House resolution passed in the middle of the redistricting fight last year from Representative Gina Hinojosa, who is running for governor right now here in our state of Texas. And she passed that resolution, which was supported by both Republicans and Democrats. And it was recognizing my 20 years of service to the Democratic Party in Texas. That should have been a bigger light bulb than it was, I think, looking back. But it took me a minute. And it was the kind of thing where once I saw what happened to Renee Good, the white single mom of 3, which my mom was when I was growing up, 3 boys. When I saw her get shot in the head 3 times, and I looked at the field, and I wasn't really impressed with the field of these primary opponents, I realized, I would kick my own butt for the rest of my life if I didn't at least toss my hat in and see what happened. It's not an easy decision. It probably would have been a lot easier if I was a single man. But when you have a spouse who has her own professional career that works with the legislature, she works to get mental health funding in rural areas, places that maybe not even have a doctor's office. That's another complication that goes with it. So we decided we would spend 6 weeks talking about it and kind of do an exploratory just within our own home. And decision day came, and Tara said, look, if you're going to do it now. I mean, this is your hometown, dude. And we don't do a lot of the lovey-dovey language around here. I'm sorry, David. And I jumped in, and I'm so glad I did, because I think I was a much needed voice to this race that was otherwise lacking.
So you've been in this space for a good long while now. It sounds like, like say 20 plus years working in this kind of space. So I would imagine, so my next question is usually about sort of like people taking this leap and whether or not they have this sense of excitement, fear, some blend of it all. What is the emotional experience of making this call? But you may have a particularly unique perspective because you've just been in the space for a while, but did you still experience some like substantial emotional experience?
I mean, David, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, every day that goes by. Earlier today, I was with the Austin High students as they did a big ice walkout at school today, and I was the only candidate down there with them, supporting them, and that was my alma mater, and I thought that it was a big deal when we walked out of the Iraq War. That was nothing compared to the numbers today, and every day, it's one of those moments where it took me a few weeks to realize, like, hey, you're the candidate. I mean, that's how you carry yourself. That's how you act in public. It's one thing. I always say this: a comedian and actor gets away with a whole lot more than a candidate gets away with, much less an office holder. And I think already in the short time I've been in this race since December 8th, I have grown up a lot. And I don't mean necessarily, I turned 40 just mid-January, but I got around to my 40th birthday, which, a lot of people make a big thing out. I forgot it was even my birthday. I'm so wrapped up in the campaign stuff. And it's this kind of thing where every day you learn a little bit more. Every day when you're surrounded by a great team, that always helps immensely. But it's that thing where I think back to my heroes, and nobody's an office holder until they are, right? Nobody has ever run for office until they do. I know my campaign manager, when I hired, said, I've never managed a campaign. I said, it's fine. I've never run for office before. So we're in this together. And she's amazing, my campaign manager, Rachel. But absolutely, I mean, every day, David, there's something that I learn new, and something that I try to, really digest and get up the next day with those lessons, right there intact.
Well, you got to tell me a little more about that. I love that you're learning something new every single day, even though you've been working in this kind of employment space for a long time, and yet you're still learning something new. So for folks who have never done this, will never go through this kind of experience, give me a couple of examples of the kinds of things like, well, learn that today, lesson learned.
Well, there's two sides, right? There's one side, there's the voters, conversations with voters, right? So where for every, 10 great conversations with voters or people that knew you growing up, that I've had an outpouring, of support from folks that I grew up with who have said, thank you for running. And I'm going, I'm flattered, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know that I could have kept myself at it if I wanted to, right? Unless, Tara had told me otherwise. I told her she's the only veto in this process. But, I think over the last decade or so, maybe it's through social media, David, where that everything is photographed and saved, right? And I think a lot of people are worried that their past is going to come back up. Therefore, will not make them a quote unquote perfect candidate. And my point to that is always that, you go back and look at the greats on either side who've been elected. They did not let their past get in their way, and they never claimed to be perfect people. Now, once you're on Mount Rushmore, once you've done 2 terms or a term as president or a few terms as senator or even Beto O'Rourke, right, who did a few terms as a congressman and since has become this folk hero here in Texas, you realize the responsibility that lands on your shoulders. But what I meant with the conversations with the voters was, for all those conversations, there's always going to be somebody who sends that Facebook message where you go, what are they talking about? You go, what does this have to do with anything? And it kind of reminds me of working in morning radio. I came up, my first job out of high school, my mornings were spent at KLBJ FM, the old Lyndon Johnson radio station that when I was hired, his daughter still owned. And we were doing shock jock stuff, David. We were competing. We were trying to beat Howard Stern in the ratings here in Austin. So,
no small task.
And we did. And the first time this show that had been on for 20 years by the time I got there, first time we beat him was when I showed up. I'm really proud of that. Terry gives me hell all the time. I know you beat Stern, grow up. He's, no one even remembers why that's even a thing. I'm like, but at the time that was beating Hulk Hogan in the ring. And when it comes to the candidates, I don't know that I was truly equipped for I'll say the media too, that I was equipped in a way in which I wish I had been for what all that brings to your table and the knives that come out. They may be plastic knives, right? Because it's just a state house race, but that doesn't make it, that you're not getting poked and you don't have to learn how to deal with that. So every day, something comes up or I go through something and on this campaign, whether it's like we were saying before we went live, whether it's housekeeping stuff, organizational campaign stuff, whether it's media stuff and getting a bad story about you in the local paper or the local, quote unquote counterculture free paper. You just have to figure out how to handle yourself, because there's been a couple moments where things have happened at meetings or editorial board meetings where I think people around me were really shocked that I didn't take the bait, because as a former crowd work comedian and, a hothead linebacker or a very aggressive point guard on the basketball court, and a wrestling fanatic, the women around me, my campaign's primarily run by women. They were very surprised that I was able to see the bigger picture and just take myself out of the equation.
Can you give me an example of that? That's really interesting, where there was some moment of potentially taking bait and you didn't. To the extent you're comfortable, will you tell me about it?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I want to get into names and stuff.
Sure. You can leave that out.
But there was there's an opponent in this race who used to work for Bush and Cheney. And I did not mention her by name at the Austin Chronicle editorial board meeting. I said what I just said to you. Let's do our research on everybody here, guys. There's the reason I got into politics was I was so just pissed off, frankly, about what Bush and Cheney were doing in 2004. And all I said was just that, was the facts of it. And that person got in my face afterwards. And then her husband got in my face. And, we have all the video of it. We haven't done anything with it. We don't need to, but we're not trying to double down or drag that out. But just that I just walked out the room. And, that was tough for me to do at the time because of the level of anger that I was feeling. But I just left, and it's not worth it, because we got to focus on whatever anybody has to say about me, David. It's nothing compared to the struggles that working folks are going through in Austin right now. So, I can point to some other ones where a candidate in this race had, I just was trying to be honest at a forum. There were 3 of us there at Circle C Democrats in South Austin, where I grew up. And I said to a question where they said, I get a question a lot about how exactly will you enact your legislation? And I said, well, one, I'm going to be a member, if elected, of a 150 member body. Then that legislation has to go to the state Senate. And then that has to go to Greg Abbott. And more likely than not, I'll be in the minority party. So for me to tell you how exactly I'm going to get this stuff done, I said, I don't have a crystal ball. And a candidate, not the candidate I mentioned, but another candidate said, well, I have a crystal ball. And you just go like, look, I'm just trying to be honest with people, because I don't want to overpromise, and I don't want to tell people that I have all the fixes, because I think we've seen that in the past in politics, where candidates come across like they know exactly and they promise the whole world and can barely, get you a beach house. And I think it's just irresponsible to try to act like you're going to get in there and you're going to, if Greg Abbott is reelected, who's one of Trump's biggest backers, I think it's very naive to think you're going to get in there and push Greg Abbott around. It will be his fourth term in office. So,
changing gears a little bit, everyone has some values. I have mine, you have yours, the people that you come across have theirs. Truth, everyone has some values that shape the way they see the world, the way they want to interact with others. Can you tell me maybe the 2 or 3 values that you hold the most dear and where those values come from?
I can't. One, I know it sounds hokey, right? This one's going to sound super cheesy, but it's the golden rule thing, right? You treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And sometimes with emotion, and sometimes after a decade of crisis in this country, and I see it here in our area, from Trump getting elected through COVID, through the ups and downs, through 2024 to now. I think if we were all just willing to be maybe just a little bit more tolerant and just hear people out, there's a golden rule thing. And 2, I would say, just to let's all remember that none of us are perfect people. That we've all been through our own story. And my old boss, Jason Stanford, who was a mentor of mine, he had a great thing where he called it, no one wants to play trauma Olympics. right? Like you can't compare your experience to somebody else's experience. Well, but that's what that person went through. So you can't undervalue that. And another value I think is just people inherently at the end of the day are good. There are very few actually evil people, I believe, even in this country. But I think when you get into social circles, when you get to family pressure, societal pressure, friend pressure, then you get wrapped up on team blue or team red, and you just want to stick to that side because these are the people that you spend time with. You don't want to be ostracized from those groups. My biggest value, I think, is we let people apologize and we forgive them if they own their mistakes. And number two, after that, addendum to this would probably be just if somebody's willing to keep fighting, get back up off the mat and not give up, that goes a long way as far as how I'm going to see somebody. And I think that goes for a lot of people.
Do these values in any way shape the way that you are running your campaign or the approaches you take to trying to convince people to vote for you?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. They're entirely what this campaign is about. It's one is to never give up. There's been plenty of turns to this campaign. We're being outspent by just about everybody in this race. We're, not given a chance in a lot of media outlets because of the fact that we're not raising a lot of money. So we must not be serious. Well, we're not going to take money from special interest or corporate PACs because the only people that I want to owe favors to are the voters of Austin. I don't want to get in there and have to owe a lot of favors to a whole bunch of groups before I get something done for my hometown. Now, as far as, nobody's perfect. I mean, I'd really like to forgive Greg Abbott about a lot of stuff he's done. And if he was, and I think this goes for a lot of candidates, I think there's such a power in admitting that you screwed up. There's such a power in that you admitted, hey, I was wrong. And I think voters and real people really appreciate that if you're able to own your stuff, own your screw ups, and say, hey, I was wrong on that. It was inappropriate what I said if that was the case, or I acted, out of anger, whatever it might have been. But just realizing that, like, hey, we're all human and we've all handled the last decade in our own ways, and it hadn't been easy for anybody on either side. Even the guy at the top.
Why do you suppose right now, you mentioned Golden Rule. A number of folks have mentioned that, and when I asked them, that question about their values.
That's great to hear, honestly. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, a number of folks have. And if they haven't, they will talk about something sort of adjacent to it. So it's something that comes up. Why do you suppose right now it is so difficult for people to do that? What is in our national psyche right now? Because the show's about division. We're going to change subjects here in a minute to get to division more specifically. But what is it about our nation right now that is struggling so much with treating people the way that we'd want to be treated, with forgiving people, for seeing people, and to the point you made? I mean, there are people who are sort of like locked in a social context, let's say, that is shaping them in ways they may not even realize. What is so hard for us right now as a nation to wrap our head around this and engage it in a more positive way?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's, man, I love the angle that you come at your show from. And this is a big thing that I talk to folks about as often as I can, which is, I think if we took the labels off of Team Blue, Team Red, we would, a lot of us, I'd say the majority, it takes 50+1 to win an election, get something done. But I think a supermajority of folks would end up agreeing on the same core values. We want our kids to be safe and have good education, right? We want to be able to afford to go to the doctor. We want to afford to be able to put food on the table. And God forbid we get a vacation in the summertime. But I think it comes down to, look, I'll be the first one to say Democrats have gone, in my mind, as extreme as you could make out the MAGA and the right. I think when you run to extremes, it leaves people, whether it's social media pressure, whether it's family pressure, having to defend extreme policies or extreme comments that otherwise they would never agree with. And they'd be able to say, like, hey, I got to walk away. I think that it goes back to that ego thing I was talking about just admitting, like, hey, I backed the wrong person, and that did not work out and I screwed up. I mean, my mother-in-law is a 3-time Trump voter. And a few weeks ago came to me and was in tears randomly in her kitchen. I turned around, she's in tears. And she goes, this isn't what she's seeing the stuff going on with ICE. And the guy, I don't know if you saw the video of the guy who got out of the car right down the road from us in Hayes County, right just south of Austin, who some young girls were making faces at him for having MAGA stuff on his car. They had done a high school walkout protesting what's going on with ICE. And he pulls the car over and went to just start swinging on them. And here's 6, 8, high school girls, a couple of band nerds, and they just start wailing on the guy. And he got charged with, assault on minors. And, it's really funny if you watch the video, he's clinging onto his MAGA hat like it's his cross in World War II, like he's Private Ryan, taking in, mortar shells. But I just think if we could take the red and the blue off of stuff and sit down and talk about what we all care about, I think we'd all be shocked at what we could get done.
I have not seen that video. But that is just, if a person can zoom out, that's just tragic in like a dozen different ways. Mm-hmm. And that is, you are hitting on in a lot of ways. And you mentioned it, right? That's what the show's about. This show is about trying to understand, for me, I've phrased this a lot of different ways, but trying to understand, are we so far gone that we can't come back? Is this what we are? Getting out of, and you've seen, if you haven't seen that video, there's a dozen or 100 more like it.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit more about these division issues, these reds and blues and whatever it might be. So
as far as that guy in Hayes County, David, I want to say about that guy in Hayes County, I think it solely goes back to what we were just talking about. We're like, in the last decade, his entire self-worth was being part of MAGA. His entire self-worth he had made into, the likes he's getting on Facebook, wearing the hat, doing the whole thing, and that's his team. Because if any responsible adult would take a step back, go, hey, these are kids, they're teenagers. They're going to be teenagers, right? But I don't know. Once you see the video, he took a whooping. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just saying, I think I almost feel bad for the guy. You know what I mean? Because you go, he's so wrapped up in all this, and obviously his own self-worth, his own masculinity is so wrapped up in this that he felt the need to just pull the car over on the side of the road, leave it running, and go running on children. Children. I don't know.
We're going to come back to that here in a minute, in a couple of sections of this script I got, because you are, maybe we should do it now, because you are addressing something that I think is really important, and it has a lot to do with the identity that people are wrapping their politics into now. I was talking to a guy who I was interviewing someone else from Pennsylvania, I think a couple of months ago now, and he'd mentioned something not unlike what you just said. It's like, it used to be like, you'd have an argument about, and I think he talked about the Iraq War actually. Sure. So you have an argument about the Iraq War, but like two people were in the same office, you can have an argument, but then you go to lunch later. Now it's so much more of, this is what I am, whether it's red or blue or anything else. This is what I am. And so if you attack that, it's not attacking some position, it's attacking the core of what I am. A person has to defend that, whatever that thing is. And that really, really troubles me. Is this sort of where you're heading in that? That sounds like kind of where you're going.
Yeah, and David, to the point, I want to say it's going on both sides.
It is.
You know what I mean? And I think too often people on the Democratic side, they as bad as the MAGA folks will be able to say, my campaign manager gets fired up, she calls it blue MAGA, and I'm probably not going to say that. But the fact that I think it just means like stuck in, unwilling to break away from the team, even when something's going on that is wrong.
It's been an encouraging thing when I've interviewed folks, and I don't know how many episodes you may have seen or not seen, but there have been a number of folks who are, I think, on both sides who have recognized this. And you'll see someone who is very much of Team Blue and some folks who are very much of Team Red, who will, when asked, all of a sudden pause and go, yeah, this is not good. This is, in the aggregate, this is very bad that we have a nation where these two sides are this angry. But let's talk a little bit more about that. So we're in this nation right now. If you see surveys out of like the Pew Research Center or Gallup or whoever it might be, survey after survey will say, we're a divided nation, right? This is not a surprise to anyone. It is not a surprise that we're a divided place, or that we appear to be a divided place. So I'll put this to you. The American public thinks we're divided. if you watch any evening news show or certainly a cable news show, it's going to feel divided. If you're on social media, God forbid, it's going to seem divided. I wonder, do you think that we are as a public divided as it appears, or is it something that is hyped and actually we're not, day to day, we're actually not as divided as it might seem on social media or the news?
It's a difficult issue, right? It's tough because I guess maybe where you are in the country at times, but at the end of the day, I truly believe that we're so much less divided. But newspapers have to sell, and cable news needs ratings, and talk radio needs listeners, and nobody wants to tune in to see WrestleMania to not see people fight, right? So when you go that angle with it, they're always going to brew that up because everything is fine and good isn't going to get eyes. It's not going to sell with the media. I know that when I talk to folks from the right, and even when I talk to folks from the left, there are things with the right that I agree with one-on-one. I don't mean stuff happening in DC or happening in Greg Abbott's administration. When you get to sit down at a barbecue restaurant and you just strike up a conversation with a stranger and come to find out, man, we all agree we should have better public schools. We shouldn't be giving all this money to Elon Musk. Like what we're seeing here in Austin and in the state of Texas, we're giving folks like Elon Musk specifically, but I'll say Larry Ellison. There's a total laundry list. We don't have time. Hundreds of millions of dollars every year. We're not getting any return on investment. And then when public schools start closing, we go, well, where's the money for the public schools? Well, we just gave, $800 million, $700 million, whatever, a couple times a year to Elon Musk to go play, spaceman. And I get it, David, I get it. If I had 16 baby mamas want alimony, I'd want to go to Mars too. I completely understand that, Elon. And it's just that thing where you go, at the end of the day, your public school closes. What the hell are parents supposed to do? And by the way, those kids in school, they're not left or right. They're not blue or red. They're just trying to, that's the best school that those parents can send them to. But I just think at this point, I think the billionaires and the elite class is having so much fun on both sides, because I think the amount of money you make, where who cares? That, man, they sit back and they watch, they laugh, them and their friends all get rich, while we're over here, two people who both make 35, 50 grand a year, somewhere in there, who are, cussing each other out on Facebook, when at the end of the day, you guys probably agree on most everything other than what team you're rooting for on television.
You've been in this space a while, like we've talked about a couple of times now. You've been observing politics for, what'd you say, 20 years? More?
Yeah, my first campaign was Kerry in 04.
Okay. So more than 20 years now, which dates us both.
And I was the guy running the Howard Dean, the Austin High Maroons for Howard Dean group. And we'd be lucky if we got 5 people there. So the Scream happened on my 18th birthday. And you look back at the Scream and you go, man, seems kind of pedestrian now.
So that's kind of where I was going to head with my next question. So you've been watching this for a long time. Americans have been divided before, right? We've been divided for a long time in one way or another, but right now it feels especially sharp. Do you have a sense of when you started to notice that, hey, something's different now? This is a different level of division or sharpness of division. Do you have a sense of when this began to occur in your observation?
I think I could probably speak to it better from what's happened on the Democratic side. But I do know, when I look up in cousins who I've been close to my entire life, blocked me on Facebook because I posted a Charlie Kirk quote in his own words after that whole debacle. And no one should be shot over their politics. I'm sorry. No one should be executed in public over their politics. I'm not in any way, shape, or form any kind of supporter of taking it violent. I'm, in fact, on the other side of, hey, maybe we eat an edible, we sit down and relax and talk about this stuff. But I posted a couple of Charlie Kirk quotes, one of which was that women of color don't have the brain or the capacity to, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't have the quote in front of me, to get stuff done that white women can get done. And I'm paraphrasing it, something along those lines. But I posted that quote, and to get blocked by cousins that I didn't even have a conversation with about it, that means people are already, first of all, people are already so on edge coming out of COVID, coming out of the last decade, of just that, when you don't have a stable leadership team in charge, whether it's country, state, locally, people are already just waiting for the next shoe to drop always. And that gets everybody very insecure. It gets everybody very on edge, But I know when I started seeing it on the left, was when we started, people tend to forget, I think. And I guess I was there for both Obama campaigns. So maybe, I may be too close to it to see how people don't remember that we didn't elect Barack Obama because he was black. And that was actually a big obstacle for him at the time. It was. I heard my own stepmother say, "No N-word will ever be president," to my face. 20 minutes before I went to the airport to go to Cincinnati to run that office. We know racism is deep in this country, but I think when the left moved to a place of wanting to pick what their candidate looked like, what they wanted, some of that's because Hillary lost. I do believe that that's a lot of where it started, was because after Obama, we decided, well, now it's time for a woman. Well, it wasn't an easy pill to swallow that she lost to who she lost to. Now you go back into the nitty gritty of her campaign and what went right, what went wrong, whatever. I don't think it does us any good now. But I know that my mom, who is a white mom who's married to an attorney for, up until I was 11, that she thought that she would have representation as a boomer white lady. She stayed at home sick for a week after that. And then we just dug in and dug in and dug in and dug in and dug in. And I think, I saw it here with Tara, on election night of 2024, I saw what I needed to see watching TV that night. And I said, babe, Tara, let's go to sleep. Like, I'm sure it'll all work out. And the biggest lie I ever told, worst acting I ever done in my life. And I wake up the next day and she's got her head on my chest sobbing. That's how I woke up the day after election day. And it's because for a minute there, for 109 days there, 109. And I'll say less than that with Tara, because we got to a place about 20 days out where she said she's cooked. Where she thought there would be a president who is not only a woman, but has the same color skin as her, and that she would feel truly, truly represented in our nation's capital. We have dug in and dug in and dug in. And I think, I'm not stoked that comedy has become partisan. I hate that. I hate that so much that, like, if you're in the Rogan verse, as they say, you have to be touting the line until very recently of Trump. If you're not with that, Colbert, Kimmel, whatever, then you have to go all in for the other side. Whereas, when I was coming up in 2003, Jon Stewart called everybody out, right? When the Iraq War went down, and I'm a senior in high school in 2004, John Kerry would be the first one to make fun of, Jon Stewart would be the first one to make fun of John Kerry and John Edwards. Edwards with his $900 haircut or whatever. And all of it. And I just think if comedy, I think that has been a disservice to us. Partisanization, is that the word I'm looking for, of media, I think doesn't do us any good except for the people working in those media outlets, getting rich off of it. So I think there's a lot of factors here, right? But I think at the end of the day, we are at a breaking point. I really do think we are at a breaking point where we can't go on like this. And that, to your point of, are we too far gone? I wonder that all the time. And I talk to folks who are convinced we are. I remember talking to folks when Obama ran. My best friend's a married black father of two boys, multiracial boys. Mom's white, dad's black. And we've known each other for 25, 26 years, been best friends. And I remember when Obama ran and he said, there's nothing he can do that will make a difference on my life here in Texas. And that broke my heart. His mom was Ann Richards' black executive assistant, which caused its own set of problems when Ann Richards won or ran even. But I just think people have got to a place where they know they can see the BS from a mile away now. And they can see, is that person going to tell me I'm just going to fix everything? Or, there's something to be said about a leader, whether it's a basketball coach, whether it's a producer of a show, whether it's a host of a podcast with the staff, whether it's an elected official, to be able to have the hard conversations, right? And to be able to say, hey, this isn't going to be easy. This isn't all just, roses and, yellow brick roads here. There's some hard conversations we're going to have. And that's the adult and the responsible thing you have to do. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Let's pick up on that. Talking about adult conversations. No surprise again, where we're in this moment. If you're paying attention on social media, but also like you said, like maybe someone at a restaurant, wherever, sitting at a bar, whatever it might be, there's this tendency right now. Someone disagrees with another person. This person's wrong, whatever it might be. Pick your topic. I don't particularly care. But this person's wrong. There's this tendency right now where folks have a sense like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to insult them. I'm going to tell them exactly how stupid they are. And I might get loud about it, might scream at the person, might not, but I'm going to, one way or the other, I'm going to make certain this person knows exactly how stupid they are. And so, in your observation, again, you've been around this, so I think you've got a pretty unique perspective. I think everyone wants to do this. I'm mad at someone, I'm going to let them know it. What are the effects of such quarrels, insults, let's say, upon the person being insulted?
I mean, upon being insulted, and I'll point to social media first on this. People say stuff, and this has been going on for, I'd say, a decade, where folks will say stuff to people on social media that you would never say to somebody's face. You would never say that. You would never come out. You know, the reason why you just said what you said about, oh, I'd like to tell them exactly what I think, and I'm going to, well, before social media, you couldn't do that because you'd either be kicked out of the place, the cops would be called, or you're banned from the restaurant or whatever. Or, your wife is or husband is very, very, very unhappy with you for some time for acting that way. It's given us this outlet to just act and say whatever people want to say. And it's right there. And unless it's going through your campaign team or you're going to your spouse, you know what I'm about to say? I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation of the last decade where I've turned to her going, I'm about to say to somebody, and no, we're not going to say that because I want to go to Easter. So we're not going to say that. But I think it's just the person who gets insulted, one, feels silenced. It feels kind of like, took the chair to the head. And two, might not have even, a lot of times I see on social media where the person who is insulted, if they're acting in good faith, and if they're really trying to have a productive conversation. Now, how often that happens, I don't know. But if somebody runs in and starts calling names, then there's going to be little tolerance for any of that from either side, and we just build that breach even deeper.
I came across something the other day, and I don't remember if I saw it on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever you see these things. And it was this person who was describing a moment where, in this sort of way, where like, hey, look, this person said a thing, so I let them have it, and I feel good about let them have it. And I thought in that moment, I don't think you helped anything. I don't think this is any better. You feel better, but I think you just caused. But to sort of pull this thread just a little bit more, and like I say, then we'll move on. But in my observation of this, it never helps. It never makes it better. Do you have any do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me?
I completely agree with you. And I if I chalk so much of it back up to social media, because you can say whatever you want. And how often do we see somebody who, I used to go by a thing where it was, if you are going to go there on social media, use your face and your name on your account. Because we see it plenty of times, some anonymous account, whether it's on whatever platform, coming in, running in, and they think, oh, well, I got my little shot in. But, like, it makes me think of the old, did you watch Seinfeld in the night? I mean, I'm sure you did, right? Yeah, who did it, right? We're big Seinfeld fans. And, the whole jerk store joke, right? And that is the basis of where we're living right now, where the whole point about George Costanza not saying what he wanted to say and why it's eaten up is because he didn't get to say what he wanted to say, but therefore he didn't get fired because he didn't say what he wanted to say. And I just think if everybody's maybe just a little slower to want to go, get that jerk store gift card and maybe just, try to figure this out here. Because as long as we sit down and can have, conversations like the ones you have on your show, I think we'd be amazed at what we could get done. Now, I have people on the left who get mad at me for saying that I have great conversations with people on the right. Now, I'm not saying we're going to agree on everything by any means, but we're always allowed to walk off and say, well, we disagree on that. We don't get the civil rights movement. We don't get a lot of big things in this country's history that really changed the game for us and made us a better democracy if people on both sides aren't willing to sit down and talk.
Let's dig into that a little bit. So at the top of the show, we talked about how you're running for office. You're running as a Democrat. At its best, at its very best, when the Democrats or the left or however you want to think about it, when it's at its best, what are folks of that political party working for? What are they trying to achieve at their best?
You know, I've had to pull myself back on this campaign because when you go to little Democratic groups of 20 people or so and they're paying dues to these groups, which a lot of people can't afford to do, and it's very insider. And I think, they forget that the other 700,000 Democratic voters in this town aren't in that meeting because they don't have time. They've got places, they got soccer games, they got to put dinner on the table. To me, the Democratic Party at its best is investing in public education, whether that's K through 12, whether that's higher education. It's a standard of right from wrong. It's a standard of racial and gender equality. Now, I think it's been a minute since the Democratic Party has been at its best. You say Democratic Party, most people are going to say Bernie Sanders these days, probably, at least in the last however many years. And to think that he is an independent in the Senate, he's not even a Democrat. And I think at some point, David, when the Democratic Party lost its sense of humor and lost its ability to laugh at itself, when they slip on the banana peel or trip over the ottoman like Dick Van Dyke, I think that chases a lot of people off. I mean, you go back and you look at, whether it was Clinton or Obama, being able to sit at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and get made fun of and sit there and take it. Because if you're the most powerful man in the world, or if it was a woman. But when we got so hyper focused on waving our finger at people about how they should speak the exact perfect way that was sent from a memo from a think tank in DC. Well, not everybody lives in that world, and there's a lot of good people who feel like they're not being spoken to. To me, the Democratic Party is about achieving an economy that works for folks who are struggling, achieving a wage, achieving an economy that works for folks who are having to work two jobs, like the public school teacher who's, leaving school and going to drive Uber until 10 o'clock at night. People who look to the government to quit looking out for not handouts. They're not looking for handouts, but they're looking for an opportunity. And with opportunity comes responsibility. But there has to be some kind of, covenant here made where we say, look, if you're willing to play by the rules and work your butt off and do the right thing, then you should have a shot at, I hate to sound like this, but whatever is left of the American dream. And I think we have been in denial in a long time about the fact that it has not worked for so many people. And that goes back to what I was saying about the billionaire class and the elite class and everybody else down here fighting over the scraps, over what have you, stuff in the drive-by media. And to me, it goes back into investing into the future, to fighting for those. If I say anyone says it's fighting for those who feel like they don't have a voice.
All right. Let's turn that question around a little bit. If that is the Democratic Party at its best, operating in good faith, let's think about the Republicans. When they're operating at their best and operating in good faith, what do they stand for? What are they trying to accomplish?
Look, I think in my lifetime, I'm a Reagan baby. That's probably why I still have the Hulk Hogan mustache, right? I'm a Reagan baby. And there's something that speaks to me when it's, by God, America's the greatest place in the world. And my youngest brother, who's a Clinton baby, and I do have this theory where whoever was president when you were born has an impact on your personality. I mean, no one who knows me can believe that my mother, who stayed home for a week after Hillary lost, wrote Richard Nixon a Valentine when she was in fourth grade, and got one back. And, oh, Kelly, happy Valentine's Day. And you go, that sounds insane to even try to wrap your head. We're still trying to find it in storage somewhere. But I do think that Republicans at their best, I mean, people seem to forget a lot of times they are very well intended and then they get wrapped up. Not the Democrats don't, not doing whatever. But I mean, Nixon created the EPA. Nixon opened up the global economy. I mean, you want to go back to Eisenhower, there is no American dream theory without Ike. Ike wins that war, gets elected president, and it's a 2-car garage. It's a wife who can afford to stay at home and take care of the kids. And of course, we're talking 100 years ago now. But I think even Bush was amazing for Latinos. Bush did amazing things for Hispanics, and Bush did amazing things, pretty good things for education when he was here as governor, or when he passed education legislation with Ted Kennedy. I don't want to relitigate the past, but I think that, I've never been a Republican because I think I was always more of an anti-establishment guy, and I think I was always more of a rebel at heart. But the old, what was it Nixon said in the checkers when they got the dog, and a good Republican petticoat is what Pat will be wearing. And they just it was very waspy. But over the years, we've seen a lot of Republicans of color who, have had to say, I can't do this with you anymore. I think it has been hijacked, and I think the Democratic Party's been hijacked too. But I think if both sides are operating at the best that they can operate at, the best is in front of us. I think, if it was up to me and we could all sit down and talk, and everybody stick to their values instead of maybe who's stuff in the wallet, then we could probably get back to some really, really productive conversation like this one.
So we've now described both sides at their best when they're operating in good faith, which maybe they aren't always, but we'll operate with that. For this discussion, we'll operate it that way. Now, you've described the best of the Democratic Party, trying to fight for people who need some help, and making certain people have making certain that people have their shot at the American dream if they're going to work hard. All the rest. That's the Democrats at their best, as you've described it. There's this opposing party who is very often going to try and thwart the Democrats.
Sure.
What are they not understanding? What is it in your observation of the opposition? You say, if you just understood this, we could at least have a better conversation. What are they not getting, do you think?
And this concept of this question, and I'm so glad you asked, because this is the concept that I think at times, I'm convinced that if I'm arguing with Tara, if my wife and I are arguing, I think if I can just have enough time, she goes, we got to be up in the morning, dude. There's not enough time for you to just sit down and just, if you only understood this. I think too many people are in that place when it comes to politics. But when, I think the Republicans, a lot of Republicans, when we saw the civil rights movement go down, we had a lot of Texas Democrats who switched parties on Lyndon Johnson, whether it was John Connally, who was our governor at the time, he was in the motorcade when JFK got shot. He flipped and turned Republican, worked closely with Richard Nixon. There's a lot of racial component to this. And I think that when Obama got elected and when he got reelected, I think it brought out the worst of both parties, honestly. Like that is the irony to me of probably one of the things in my life that I was most proud to be a part of, which is I think it brought out the worst, which means the left decided that they could just pick an identity of somebody and we could run them and only talk to certain groups and still get elected by leaving all this other part of the pie, all these other voters out because you're not speaking to them or you're waving your finger at their face. And I think just in my lifetime, with George W. Bush passing the Bush tax cuts, greatest redistribution of wealth in the history of this country, definitely in my lifetime, probably in modern history, I believe, from working folks to, the rich people. And I don't know if it's just rich kids, because I went to school with a lot of them at Austin High, and before that, growing up, but rich kids who just aren't used to having to struggle and having to actually deal with accountability. But I know there are good Republicans out there, and I know there are Republicans right now ready to be done with the MAGA stuff. For if anything, because they would like a shot at a successful country. They would like a shot at a country that works at the very least better for them than it's working for them now. I mean, the whole reason why we did redistricting last fall is because between Trump's tariffs killing the Texas economy, 8th largest economy in the world, where you say, Canada and Russia, the line starts behind us. Between that and the Epstein stuff, people in small towns, people in the suburbs, they said, this is not only hurt my pocketbook, but we're embarrassed. And it's also, the whole child abuse thing. Now, I do think that if we could have a unifying message on both sides, And of course, everybody, when they run, they attempt to do that. I'm probably doing it right now if you watch us back in a couple of years. But if we could stick to that instead of letting special interest and corporate money get involved, I still think that, like, I like to believe that when I'm 60 years old here in 20 years, the country looks a lot better and is not quite the dystopian place we live in today.
Let's think a little bit more about these conversations, because you've said you've had conversations with Republicans, you've had conversations across the aisle and all the rest. Let's play a little bit of a hypothetical for a second here. So let's suppose things go well for you. You win this primary. The campaign takes off in a big way, over the spring and the summer, and then you head into the fall. You win. You wake up on election day and you've won. One way or the other, there's going to be a lot of folks out there who didn't vote for you. There's going to be a lot of folks who, very quickly, if they didn't know you, they do now, and maybe you're angry with you, might come by your office to yell at you, might send you mean letters, whatever it might be. So question is, how would you want to build trust with constituents didn't vote for you, want you gone?
It's funny. This is something we've focused on and we've tried to talk a lot about on our campaign. And I've tried to talk a lot about, which is we're going to make a commitment to getting back to constituents. Whether you like me or not, I'm here to represent the people of this community if I win. And, whether you're a Republican who lives in town, whether you're a Democrat who lives in town, whether you're mad, whether you want to bring a box of chocolates by, I highly doubt that second part's going to happen unless it's Valentine's Day. But I'm ready to have you walk into that legislative office at the Capitol and sit down with me if I'm there and I don't have to be somewhere. And I want to hear your real opinion. And if you need to get it out and scream at me, get it out and scream at me, because at least you will know that you have an elected official who will sit there and hear your concerns and will validate your feelings. And I think so much this last decade has, I think Trump won the second time because with everything else, with all the convictions, everything else, he made people feel validated. Does he retweet the craziest stuff? Sure he does. But does that person who he retweeted goes, hey, he saw my stuff and shared it. Wow. And we don't do that a lot on the left. We're at last post Obama, I think we've been in this holier than thou thing that has not helped us by any means. But I will always be available. And I look forward to those conversations. Like before I got in this race, Glenn Maxey, he used to be head of the Texas Democratic Party. He was the first openly gay elected official this side of the Mississippi. I called him up and we haven't always got along. I was the biggest pain in his ass as a staffer that I think he probably ever had. And it wasn't because we were on the other side of issues. It was just, you just drive me nuts, man. But let's go eat Chinese food for lunch, right? We go hit the Chinese buffet and have, a great meal and go back to the office. And the thing is I called him up and we had a perfectly calm, respectful conversation. And I said, what do you think it would take? And he said, well, would you be willing to talk to people who disagree about this stuff with you all the time, every day? Would you be willing to talk about this stuff all the time, every day? And I mean, anyone who knows me knows that's what he already does. I eat, breathe, live, sleep this stuff because I want to do my part. And I've tried to for the last decade, the best I can, to give, at least say that I left it all out on the field when, the game clock runs out, whatever that fourth quarter is, election season or life or whatever, that I did my part to try to shoot for a better, calmer country that works for the people who need it to work.
All right, let's take that up a level. So we've just talked about constituents who may not like you, may come by your office and yell at you, whatever it may be. Let's take that up a level to other elected officials. So as you noted earlier, you go to the Texas State House, all of a sudden you're one in a lot of folks, and you're probably in the minority party. There are probably folks across the aisle who you are going to have challenges with. What would be your approach for trying to build trust with people across the aisle who, at this point, it doesn't feel to me as an observer, and I'm not in politics, but as an observer, it does not feel like people in the legislative body, whether they're at the federal level or state level, whatever it might be, these folks do not want to talk to each other. How might you go about trying to resolve some of that?
I think back to like even when Obama was in office and John Boehner, Speaker of the House, was sneaking out of his home in the middle of the night to go to the White House, and they'd take him through that old tunnel to sneak him in, and him and Obama would sit up there on the Eisenhower balcony and try to get the fiscal cliff fixed for a government shutdown. I know when the shutdown happened in '94 between Clinton and Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton would be at the White House until 3 a.m. in the Oval Office, with pizza boxes scattered all over the room. Look, I mean, I'm willing to meet with any Republican. I'd be happy to make a point to meet with every Republican in the House to see, is there anything that we agree on that we can co-sponsor together? You know, and if we have to walk off and say we don't agree on anything, so be it. But I think there is stuff that we agree on. Now, the problem with that is I think there are a lot of ways where I make the left a lot madder than I make the right. Now, Austin, Texas is a Democratic town, but it's not a strong Democratic town when you get up close. The voters are, but I think it has become so insulated. I mean, people were mad at me for not asking permission to even get in this race in my hometown here, the only one who's from Austin. And I know that there's a lot of Democrats who get mad at me when I say I'd be willing to sit down and talk to Republicans. Well, again, if we're in the minority party, what shot do we have if we're not going to attempt to work on stuff that we agree on together? You know, whether that's, you know, cannabis legalization and taxation, whether that's public schools. I mean, newsflash to everybody, public schools is not, like I already said, red versus blue. There are kids from all areas of Texas who are hurting because of this stuff. And I would make a point, if elected, we committed to 10 constituent return phone calls a week so far, if elected, that we'll take 10 voicemails and I'll make a point to sit down and call them back every week that I'm in office. Now, knowing me and my wife and my campaign manager have both said, dude, we're going to have to pry the phone out of your hand. You're going to get done with 10 and you'll be wanting to sit there and call them all back. You know, if you're good for your constituents, sometimes a person that on paper may not match up, but the voters know them and feel like they can reach out to them and feel like they can get a response, at least an acknowledgement, a validation, man, that goes so far.
I was interviewing a woman right around the holidays in Oregon, where I'm sitting right now. She was she's a constituent. She's not running for anything, but she went to the Oregon State Legislature and she wanted to talk to someone. She's very much a Republican, a very, very sweet person. Really enjoyed the interview with her. And so she went in, she had something she was really concerned about. She didn't give me a lot of the details, but she went to go talk to, you know, someone who was a representative for her. She's a Republican. This person's a Democrat. And the story as she relayed to me was this. Went to go talk to this person. This thing really bothered me. I laid out my thoughts. And the person responded with, I don't know what to say to that. And that was the end of the discussion.
That's just shameful. That's shameful. If you have time to sit down and talk, there's no reason not to sit down and talk. Now, if that's your ego and you can't, if you're too high horse, I mean, you know, I don't know if it's my former years of being a stand-up and, you know, early on, not a great one. Everybody's going to have an off night, you know, walk in the room, whatever you may be doing, getting turned down for auditions, getting cut out of stuff. When, you know, it's an ugly feeling and it's a gross feeling to, you know, hype up that you're in some movie and you take your wife to go see her. We were engaged at the time and then you get there and you never show up on screen. And I spent a week there in that town and made a point. We rented a car. We got there and I got an Airbnb and I'm nowhere to be found. That's a bummer. But like, I just think some of it's just humility and some of it's, are you willing to, you know, I grew up in a home where, you know, my parents were both, when they were together up till I was 11, they were both Democrats, but we had lively discussions, you know, and to what you were saying earlier about how folks during the Iraq war could go to lunch together or argue, you know, at whatever meeting or what in passing in the office or whatever about whatever issue, then, you know, let's go to lunch. It's so funny. Tara always tells me the story about how her dad almost divorced her mom because her mom voted for Ross Perot in '92 when he voted for H.W. Bush. And, you know, at the time, that's so funny because in '92, that's unheard of to be so upset about that, you know, and I don't think you can really truly understand what's going on in the world if you don't have the conversations with the folks living out there in the real world.
Some say, we talked a few minutes ago about the American dream. We can return to some surveys and some polls here for a second. I'm a researcher by training. I love my surveys and polls. A lot of folks say that America's best days are behind us, right? And I think right now, the more you read these things, it seems like it's getting worse. Like more and more people say, like, no, America's heading to a pretty bleak place. Others, but there are some folks who think our best days are ahead. When you look at the country, what do you make of this? Are our best days in the past? Or are they in the future? What do you make of that?
I know it's really easy. It's really easy for folks to feel like it's over. Forget it. I mean, I remember running with the run up to Trump in 2024. Folks who voted Democrat their whole life. I'm that guy in the friend group or the family group that everybody wants to come talk politics with, and hey, what's going to happen or how'd that happen afterwards, whatever. To which Tara always goes, you don't have to take those calls. I go, well, I mean, these are people who are really struggling with the situation, and I care about them. And I truly believe that our best days are ahead of us, but now are they going to happen overnight? I moved back from Chicago after the second Obama campaign, thinking that we would have already turned Texas blue. But we were going on, well, demographics are changing. Young people vote. And, it's just all going to happen if we just show up. That's not the case. We have to do our work. And by doing the work goes back to what you were just saying about having the conversations. Now, people are so beat down, David. And I know you know this. It's interesting because we're in two very different states. I mean, I don't know if there are two more different states right now. But I know that I can't survive by convincing myself our best days are behind us. I've gone through so many ups and downs in my life and have made comebacks that at the time I was faking it till I make it, telling people that no, I'm coming back. And then I'd get home and go, what are you doing? What are you, like, it's over. But I think, it's going to take courage. It's not going to be easy. I mean, this right now, I feel like if you're a millennial, I'm not worried about Gen Z right now. They're kicking butt, and the way that they know how to use the internet and access information is incredible. But I think Gen X and millennials, this is our moment in history right now, guys. This is truly this is our Normandy Beach, and we're lucky that it's this instead of Normandy Beach. And I believe our best days are in front of us. Now, maybe that may be the Reagan baby in me, right? Where it's just always morning in America and, well. And, but at the same time, I think if we don't have that inside of us, I mean, you think back to when this country was founded, folks, you look back, I watched Ken Burns' American Revolution over the holidays. You look back and you go, what business on earth did any of these people think that they would get this done? It's crazy when you go back to look at it. I mean, it's a really insane idea that they were going to pull any of that off, and they did. But they believed in themselves. My uncle, who was a basketball coach, who we lost to cancer, he's one of the most winningest coaches in 5A Texas basketball, high school Texas basketball. More players that went off to college, whatever. Every year at his basketball camp, the quote every year on the back of the shirt, you get a free T-shirt at camp, and you got to wear it. And on the back of the shirt, it said, champions do every day what others do occasionally. Now that doesn't, and that's his quote. Now that doesn't necessarily mean, you won that day. How many great teams have we seen lost that weren't supposed to lose to some ragtag team? But it means you carry yourself like one. You carry yourself that, you can take some licks and get up and keep fighting. And it all sounds so cheesy these days because people are, oh my God. It broke my heart to see so many Democratic voters going, Trump's going to win again. And I'm going, well, if I had that attitude in 2008, we would have had McCain and Palin, and God forbid something happened to McCain and we get Palin, and looking back, and I'm missing them like you wouldn't believe. Hell, I feel bad about the way we did Mitt Romney on like a 3% tax difference. But it's going to take some of that, pick anybody's favorite sports movie, believe in yourself. And believing in us and believing in this country. And that goes for both sides. So, I mean, that's the best I think I can answer that.
All right, let me come to this question in a slightly different way. At the top of this conversation, you'd mentioned Charlie Kirk. You talked for a second about political violence. We've had political violence in this country. This is a thing we've had for a long time. Yeah. It feels right now like there's a sharpness to the violent moments in our nation. I mean, we've seen. I mean, my goodness, the Democratic lawmakers, murdered in Minnesota.
Right.
Of course, Charlie Kirk. I mean,
January 6th.
This goes on and on right now. I mean, Gabby Giffords and
oh man, people didn't sleep on that one. The guy had to come back from the space station. Mark Kelly did.
Yeah. I mean, like back when I lived in Virginia, Steve Scalise, was shot just a couple of blocks. I used to jog by that. Another survey I saw recently suggested that a lot of Americans fear that violence in our nation is going to get worse. And so, as someone who is running, are you concerned that political violence in our nation is going to get worse? Do you think we're going to snap out of this and it's just a phase? Like, what are you making of this?
The stuff with ICE, it's really scary. But I think, a silver lining might be if Greg Abbott really meant what he said and what he's saying about ICE, then you'd see today when those kids marched out of Austin High that I was with down at my old high school, they would have had, I wholeheartely, David, expected to roll up and to see these kids walk down and get thrown down on the ground and get completely, just knees and backs, if not worse. And I think now the way that this is being all ignited, I guess I should say, is that they're very, very tactical about it. They're using a scalpel on what parts of the country to start this with. I have a good friend of mine that I grew up with, and she's a therapist for very low-income folks in San Antonio, psychologist for them, doing counseling for them. And one morning she calls me about 8:30, and I was worrying that one of her parents passed or something really bad happened. She goes, "Hey, I'm driving to work, and my office is in downtown San Antonio, and I was wondering, hey, how come ICE isn't here? Because if they're looking for Hispanic people and Mexicans, and wouldn't that be going on all day, every day in San Antonio? I mean, that's one of our biggest Hispanic areas ever. I think that it's completely valid to be worried about political violence. I mean, who wouldn't be? But I think that at some point we can't let fear dictate us, right? I'm not going to do the Roosevelt quote. I won't do it as well as he does. But I do think that, and unfortunately, that is an outlier that may always be in the cards to some extent, right? I mean, I was raised on to quote unquote, way, my old man would put it, the gospel of Lyndon Johnson, Jack Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. Well, 3 out of 4 of those got shot in public. And you go to Charlie Kirk. Look, I wasn't the biggest fan. I will say this, I'll own this. I loved his approach of prove me wrong. Charlie Kirk's whole thing is like, I'll argue with you about anything. Step up, take the microphone, right? I saw some of those charming clips after Charlie Kirk passed away was him arguing with people. He's a Cubs fan. I'm a Cubs fan. I used to live in Chicago. I used to live down the street from Wrigley Field. And that was before the World Series. They were still the loser Cubs. And to see him argue Star Wars or argue Chicago Cubs baseball, I mean, look, you got to give it to him. And you see him go on Gavin Newsom's podcast and get into it. That goes back to that thing we were saying about conversations. Now, is there maybe more to the story and all that investigation that ever kind of comes through and it all gets fishy? There always is. More likely than not, there always is. I know exactly where I was when Gabby Giffords got shot. And I remember being kind of the only one in my social circle at the time who's as rocked in Texas as, not doing trauma Olympics, but I'm just going like, that really hit me hard. She's setting up a voting table outside of a grocery store. I mean, you look at what happened. We seem to sleep on the fact that we've had more school shootings in the last 10 years than we have maybe in history combined, and I think at the very least we can all argue and we can all agree on that children should be safe, right? Like we can all argue that we don't need to deal with that, but is political violence a factor? I think it always will be, to your point, since day one. It always has been. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt took a shot in the middle of a speech, and luckily he had that book there and he kept speaking, which, we don't know how that story went and what really, but that's that testament of, look, it's not making change and fighting for the right thing isn't always easy. It's not always safe.
So if we've got this nation of folks who is exhausted, let's say, divided to an extent, on edge. I think it might have been the word you used 20 minutes ago, something like that. Do you think that most Americans, just the American public, the me's and the you's of this nation, do people want this division, this anger, this sharpness to get better? Or do you think rather than people wanting this to get better and for us to try and find a way to, hey, we're going to work this out, we can do it? Or do you think most Americans right now think, maybe it's not that I want it to get better, I want my team to win and the other team to be defeated and go away?
Right. And, unfortunately, I think that when it comes to the teams, it's now at a place where it's not just red versus blue, but it's what faction of red or blue that you're in. And that kind of divisiveness is never going to work out. I think at the end of the day, most people want to feel like the boot is off of their neck, whether it's financially, socially. Like I said, when we started, I think most people are good people. I mean, I think the super majority of the folks who are not evil people out to burn things down. There are always going to be people who stick to their same teams, and that's because, like we were saying earlier, they're so wrapped up in it. That's where all their value comes from. Man, I think that most people want to work together and make things better. Now, how much we can peel off and whether or not everybody's going to be ready to sit down and have that moment. My wife, a woman of color, always says that the only way people are going to get it is to really go through hard times that they're not used to going through. And that is really tough. But as a woman of color who's always had to jump twice as high, run twice as fast, do twice as much work in half the time, I remember turning to her when Kamala Harris was running, why? It sounds so stupid, David. I was like, I don't get it. How did they twist that up? She goes, she's a woman of color, Slade. Hello, dude. Obviously, you don't know the experience of a woman of color in the workforce. Well, that's fair. That is fair. Because to me, it all looks good, sounds good, let's go. But I think if both, I'm only going to speak Democratic side. They barely allow me to speak at those events, much less the MAGA events. If we can stop the infighting and we can get the money out of politics, we can at least do our part from my side as Democrats. That would go a long way, because it all comes down. People tell me that, politics isn't performative. I got to say BS. People say it's not about how you make people feel. I got to say BS. Reagan, I'll give Reagan the biggest credit in the world, just like Obama did. Reagan showed up and he made people feel like everything was going to be okay. And that's where you get Reagan Democrats from. At the end of the day, it felt stable. People just want a stable leader. Now, unfortunately, in 2024, Trump was the alternative to that when the Democrats were so in disarray. I had, the infamous Biden-Trump debate. It's on a Friday night. And Tara says, I'm not going to sit here with you and watch this live. I'm going to go to dinner with my best friend and my mom, and we're going to go eat Mexican food. I'll be home when it's over. Don't text me about it. I don't want to hear about it. I had an interview scheduled that next Monday morning with the Biden campaign. And I had wanted to work for Joe Biden for a long time. But you get to a place where you go, it's like watching Hulk Hogan walk out last year and get booed, where you go, this isn't the Joe Biden I wanted to work for. I don't know who this is. And I went on a ton of podcasts at the time, and people would shout me down and say, we have to stand by Joe Biden. And I go, no one on earth. There's nobody who can watch that debate and say we can stand by that person. Now, he didn't get enough sleep. He's on Ambien, whatever. But we have to own it when when it sucks, and it's hard to get people back in this clip media world we live in. That's what I told you yesterday on the phone. I love that you're doing long form stuff and having real nuance level, real deep conversations. Now, if people take the time to get into that, I don't know. I'm not going to be able to, I could get the horse to water. I can't make it drink. But I do think that these conversations, and you see that Joe Rogan has dictated a lot of our American culture from these long form conversations. And I think they're so important. I'm hard pressed to think that people want anything to get any worse. But part of me thinks that it's going to get worse before it gets better due to what's going on with the Epstein files. And I see it in my own race. where folks don't even want to touch it. People barely want to talk about ICE. Even the Hispanic candidates in this race barely want to talk about ICE. Now, is that because they're backed by Republicans? Maybe so. I mean, you have to go do your research. But I think I was talking to my mother-in-law this morning. We're riding in the car, and they're so insulated. If you're watching Fox News, you're not hearing any of it. If you're watching local news, you're not hearing any of it. And we know Fox News, but local news is struggling. I mean, I just think it's a really hard conversation, David, to talk about the levels of child abuse that have gone on in that situation, in that story, without people completely losing their minds because of how hard it is to hear. I mean, it's some really, really rocking, ugly, despicable. I mean, it makes your skin crawl when you hear what went on. And then you add all the games to it, and it just pits us further into it. But I like to think that we're getting very close to a breaking point when people on both sides are going to go, hey, we know right from wrong. And whether or not it's pointing your finger at people and telling them they didn't use the right words, or whether it's telling people that, like, no, don't believe your lying eyes, listen to our talking points. So, I mean, I'm hopeful. I don't know.
All right, let me give you two more, and then I'll let you have your Friday evening back.
Oh, please. This has been a pleasure, David. This show should be everywhere.
This is a fun conversation. I've enjoyed this. Okay, let's imagine you're sitting down with someone. This person disagrees with you just fundamentally. This person is, on the right, they see the world fundamentally different from you. But again, as I often like to think of folks, you and this person are sitting down. Maybe it's coffee, maybe it's beer, maybe it's whatever you like to do. And this person says, hey, here's the deal. For 5 minutes, I want to hear from you. I don't, and this person may be annoyed. I don't understand you. I don't get you. I don't understand the way you think about the world. But I want to listen. I want to hear from you for 5 minutes. Floor is yours, and they're not going to interrupt, not going to fact check, not going to argue back. They just want to hear from you about the way that you think about these kinds of things. That way they can understand. They don't have to actually use the whole 5 minutes if you don't want, but you're welcome to. What would you want to say? What would be some of the points you'd want to get across? And you're probably not going to change that person's mind,
sure,
but they might get you.
And that's a lot more than we can ask for, right? That's a lot, just that. Look, I'm a kid who was born here in Austin, Texas, at St. David's Hospital. My dad was such a struggling attorney that when Michael Dell walked in as a college kid, asking him to represent him in a personal injury thing, he said, what can you pay me? He said, well, I can build you a computer. My dad said, who's going to need a computer? Hey, Dell, get out of here. And my dad was a struggling lawyer. My mom was a social worker. And my dad starts to make quite a bit of money moving up in his firm that was formerly Ed Clark, who was Lyndon Johnson's fixer. Basically, his Carl Rove was James Carville. And we get to a place where when I'm 11 years old, our house burned down. And
wow,
I don't talk about that a lot. And so here you are, a kid, and you're, living the dream, all the action figures, all the Ninja Turtles, all the Ghostbusters, playing all the sports, doing the drama thing, doing, guitar lessons, whatever. And you wake up one morning, everything you know is gone. You're living in a hotel. And not the Chateau Marmont, the courtyard, whatever, side of the highway. And a week later, my parents sat us down and split. They decided to split up. And a week later, they get divorced and say, it's over. So, the uncertainty there as a kid, you're on the eve of teenage and hormones and everything else. And I poured it all into sports, poured it all into drama stuff, being, in all the plays and everything. One of the most mind-blowing things, David, for me on this campaign was about a month in, I looked up and I had the public endorsement and contributions from the assistant principal at Austin High. They used to send me to Saturday school. And I had the endorsement and contribution from the coach that used to make me run laps for my smart mouth at Austin High. And at the time, you go back and tell 2004 me, and I'd say, dude, you're talking to the wrong person. It can't be me. Look, I'm not a perfect person. I've screwed up plenty of times in my life. I've gotten in trouble. And this stuff I'm not happy about, right? But none of us are perfect, and I own that. And I've worked my butt off for 20 years to make sure that the candidates I worked for across this 40 campaigns were candidates that I believed in, that I did not have to sacrifice my values, that I did not have to sacrifice, I'm working for a total fraud here type thing. but it's a great paycheck, which you see too often on both sides of politics. I moved back from Chicago, Illinois. My big dream in life, David, was comedy and acting, right? And until recently, I got to a place where I could be a working actor in Austin, Texas, my hometown, on a set at a studio 5 days a week, which was unheard of when I was growing up here. And when I was at the Obama campaign, I was at Second City at night, and I wanted to get SNL. I wanted to go off and be in Saturday Night Live. And I'm alternating nights at Second City and Laugh Factory, doing stand-up, doing improv, doing radio shows, any radio show that would have me on, and I guess you're the most recent incarnation of somebody who was cool enough to have me on. And when we ended that, it was so empowering, not only after 2008, but after 2012, to say, if we all work together, I'm only speaking from the Democratic side, just from my experience, if we all work together, there's really no telling what we can achieve. Now, does it get a lot more complicated once you get into office? It does. I mean, I imagine it does. I've never been in office, but I've seen heroes of mine get elected and it didn't go great. Look, I always mean what I say. I'm never going to pretend to be somebody I'm not. I want to take the time to get to know as many people as I can. I can't tell you how many events I've been to where my campaign manager's going, we don't have time for you to keep talking to, Dolly over here. We got to go. And I'm going, but she's talking about, well, we got to go. And I just think that I am the type of person, well, I know I'm the type of person who is truly interested in other people's experiences. And I'm truly interested in their stories and what they've been through and how they got to where they're at. I'm never going to be beholden to special interest or corporate money. I'm only going to be beholden to the folks here in my hometown. To represent Austin in the Texas House would be the biggest honor of my lifetime. It would be every single day. There's not a single day that I would sleep on the responsibility or the honor that goes into that. What you see is what you get. And like Tara always says, you either like the guy or you don't like the guy. There's no middle ground. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad, but at least, I'm going to sit down and talk to you about this stuff. And I think I'm a guy who's been through ups and downs, but I never gave up. As lofty as my goals might have seemed at times, there's a lot of times where somehow I pulled it off, but somehow I ended up there. But I think so much of it is just refusing to give up. And that's what I think I'd like people to know about me, if anything.
Well, I think that's probably a perfect way to end.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me on, man.
This was a fun conversation. I really appreciate your time as well. I know that folks who listen to this will appreciate your perspective. I think this has just been a good conversation. So thank you for your perspective. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me on, man.